Hi, I'm Craig Dunham. I'm the CEO here at Lumar. I've been in this business for about 2 years now, and I'm excited to sit down with Scott Brinker and have a really candid conversation about the importance of websites, the health of your site, and to get his perspectives on the broader state of the MarTech universe today. First, before we dive in, I want to get some logistics out of the way. There's a QA box at the bottom of the page where you can submit questions. Feel free to submit those questions throughout the webinar. At the end, we'll take questions and we'll try to get to as many as we can, obviously time permitting. Secondly, we will send a short survey at the end of the webinar as well. It'll take less than a minute, I promise. It won't take too much of your time. Would love it if all of you can fill that survey out. The idea here is that it'll enable us to better tailor content in the future programming based on the feedback that we get from this session as well, and understand the things that are really important to you as we make these more and more relevant. The third thing we'll get out of the way is this webinar will be available to view on demand on the lumar.io website in just over a week or so. Because I said it's available online, please don't everyone drop off and wait for that review. Stay here with us today. We love having you live as well. Okay, with me, I have Scott Brinker, someone who for many and most of us doesn't need a whole lot of introductions. Scott has been analyzing marketing technology and its impact on marketing organizations for more than a decade now. He serves as the editor of the chiefmartech.com blog. He's the producer of the Marketing Technology Landscape as well, which many of us are familiar with. He also serves as the VP of Platform Ecosystems at HubSpot, so helping to grow and nurture the company's community of technology partners. He authored the best-selling book, Hacking Marketing. I suggest you all go and check that out as well. I'll do that plug for you, Scott. And it's all about adapting software management practices such as agile methodologies to marketing teams. And so thank you, Scott, for taking the time to be with us today.
Awesome. Well, it's great to be here with you, Craig. This is a really fun topic. I've been looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, me as well. It's such an interesting time, I'd say, to be in software. Market valuations have come down. There's a greater focus on cash efficiency. There's the SVB mess that happened a few days ago, which is a central figure in the startup and/or growth tech community. There's all kinds of activities that challenge leaders in new and different ways. And we'll get into some of that as part of this discussion, but I thought where we'd start first is a bit of a poll. And we'll just gauge the audience, get some interaction, and then we'll dive into some Q&A. And so the first poll is, when it comes to improving your website overall, what is the biggest hurdle that your team faces? And we will give folks, call it 20 to 30 seconds or so to read through and get us an answer. And for all of you who click, we have no problems at all. Please send over your contact information and identify yourself. So maybe you'll be leading this next session. And so I would love to hear from you. All right, we'll give folks a few and then we'll start to see those results. All right. It looks like messy data is the bulk here, with not enough resources being a big problem for folks. We certainly hear that quite a lot. Scott, anything for you jump right out in these results?
10% who say they have no problems at all. So yeah, we should definitely have them as the panel next time. But yeah, the data one makes sense. If as a panelist, I did not vote, but yeah, I think that's something like in general across MarTech and marketing, we just see such an explosion of data, which has a lot of benefits, a lot of things we can get out of it. But yeah, wrangling that, organizing it well. Yeah, a lot of people do have that challenge.
Yeah, and so why don't we start to dive into some of the topics that we have outlined, and we'll follow this basic structure here, which is the importance of your website, why it matters, We'll take a look at sort of the state of MarTech more broadly and the various ecosystems that exist. And then we'll give a little bit about website intelligence and how we define that here at Lumar as well. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But I saw a quote from you, Scott, recently that said your website is unquestionably your most important digital channel. I think I have a quote that I've used, which I've thrown around, which says your website is the first and most impressionable of your digital channels, which is a very similar approach. And so as you think about all the various places where a customer can engage, there's texting, there's email, there's social, can you elaborate a little bit further? Like, why does the website still matter as much today?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know, I mean, certainly for the marketers in the audience here, part of what we wrestle with is the explosion of channels. There's all these different channels and touch points, and it seems there's always some new emerging channel that we're having to keep an eye on as well, too. But there is a common thread across almost all of these channels, which is, if you think of them as this massive solar system of planets and moons and asteroids flying by, the sun is really the center of the gravity, and that's what the website is. It's like almost all of these other channels ultimately lead people back to your website, and with good reason. While there are definitely these micro engagement points we can have across so many different platforms, with prospects and customers, when you actually want to get into the meat, of, any sort of information or content or engagement, or what some of the activities that I want to be able to do with this business, it almost all comes back down to the website. And so I kind of feel like, yeah, if I don't know, I'm taking this metaphor far too far. I've been known to do that from time to time, but right, like if your sun is not in good shape, the rest of the planets around it, their lifespan doesn't look particularly positive either. So, websites, center of the solar system.
There you go. I mean, feel free to use it. It's a good metaphor. We'll allow it to continue for the rest of this if it's okay with you. But when you think about that center of the solar system, the website itself, right? We oftentimes in our business talk about, historical, like obviously we've been in SEO and we think about it as, being discoverable, right? Someone can find you in some way via search. We've seen that paradigm really extend to, not just being discoverable, but also thinking about how do you have inclusive and optimal experiences when you're on that site. And then ultimately that will lead to conversion, however you define conversion, whether it's direct revenue that's acquired from your site or potentially increasing readership or viewership, or et cetera. And so like we think about the overall customer experience. Is that a term that you would use to sort of define what someone would get when they land on your site?
Yeah, I mean, customer experience is certainly like a big tent. There's a lot in there. I think maybe, to sort of hone in here, like there's a whole dimension of customer experience, which is about what are the things we need to deliver to our customers to give them a great experience with us. And we'll sort of say like, okay, that's one level, but then once you've decided what, the how matters. The actual like mechanisms by which you were delivering this. Ooh, and you brought up this graph. We'll talk about this in a bit, but like, you might say like, oh, well, we want people to be able to access this content, or we want them to be able to like, get this calculation on, what a particular solution is, or we want them to be able to change information about, like an order, or, like all these sorts of things that we know they want to be able to do to have a great customer experience. That's great, but it's like when you actually get to the delivery of that, and a lot of this delivery is happening through your website. I mean, like, how good is it? Is it responsive, both from a performance perspective? Does it work on the right devices? Is it accessible? And then even getting, deeper down into like, okay, as people don't just deal with a single page, on your website, but very often they are going through these journeys and these flows. Like, how is that flow? Is it smooth? Are there places where they're getting stuck? Where are they dropping off? There's just a ton of this that if you say like, I know what I want to deliver as a customer experience, but am I actually in the how implementation of that fulfilling the promise of what that vision should be. I think that's the part of customer experience that anyone who's responsible for the website like really wants to be paying close attention to.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And in line with some of the things that we've heard as we're out in market often and talking to folks, industry experts like yourself, but then directly from our customers. And it's a big focus on key, call it yes, the overall workflow, but then like a narrowed focus on like the pages that matter the most, the pages that are revenue driving, the pages that are ones that generate and drive the most traffic, and making sure that the experience that people have across the site are good, but especially on those that are going to make the most impact, and knowing how and when and where to hone in performance and accessibility, things like that, exactly as you laid out. And so I did maybe get a little ahead of myself as I brought up this graphic, because I was excited when I sort of saw it and got my arms around it. And you've spoken about sort of this concept of a three-dimensional approach into designing what that experience should be like, and one that goes sort of beyond medium, message, and construction, to add sort of these idea of mechanisms as a crucial part of how marketers engage with consumers. And you've talked about the website as being one of the mechanisms by which one of the mechanisms as a dimension of marketing, which can be actioned. And so maybe could you talk a little bit more about how the website sort of embodies this idea of mechanisms in this model of yours?
Yeah, well, if we start with the left-hand side here first, this is sort of like, one of the, was it McLuhan, like, oh my goodness, 50 some years ago, about like, the medium is the message, and this idea that shaped the minds of, marketers and media folks for like a generation of like, okay, yes, in marketing, we have these messages we want to deliver, but our choice of media, like where it appears and how it appears, like how that message is delivered, actually impacts the way that people interpret it. And so hence, yeah, the media is the message. These things are like entwined. And this is true, and it still is true today, right? It's not just the message, but it's the way we present it, to people. But what's really interesting is when we came into this digital era of marketing, and particularly around the website, it wasn't just that this was static content of like, oh, these are the messages and they appear here and they look like this. Yeah, maybe in 1996, that was the totality of what we were trying to do with our websites. But we've moved beyond that. And we realized that, a lot of, the reason people come to our websites, is because there are actions they want to take. There's like engagement that they have with us. It is truly an interactive medium. And as a result, the way those mechanisms work actually says as much about our company and what we're trying to communicate, to prospects and customers as the message in the media itself. It's like a great example. Like if, my message is, as a new software company, our software is the easiest software to use. And I'm going to have a really nice picture of a happy person at a keyboard, just big smile. Okay, yeah, I've got my message, I've got my media. But then if your actual website is like, oh man, this thing's so slow, I can't figure out where this stuff is. I went here, it got some error page. Then the message you're ultimately sending is like, well, maybe your software probably isn't that easy to use because the mechanisms I'm interacting with don't reflect the brand promise. And again, I'm an optimistic person in general, so I tend to look on the bright side of this, which is these mechanisms, like how you make your website work, how performant it is, how consistent it is, how easily things flow, is such a great lever to be able to communicate your values, your value proposition to customers. But there is the other side of that coin, which is, oh, if you're not paying attention and do that and delivering it well, you could really be undercutting like the very brand communication you're trying to deliver to the market.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I mean, we often will talk about that in the context of the architecture of the site and make sure things like your web development teams have programmatically designed it and set it up in such a way that the flows are nice and seamless and is highly performant. But there are a lot of other people, right, that are involved in this process. And so maybe we could talk a little bit about the people throughout the organization who are impacted by the success of the website, and some of those influences that it can have throughout the organization. Are you seeing sort of an increased engagement around this from the organization?
Yeah, well, again, since you gave me permission to go back to my overextended
did.
metaphor, right? Like everything, like it's the center of gravity. In fact, actually, where the value is to the website to customers is it is that reference point. So it's not just about like where I would go for like a top of the funnel marketing experience, but like all the way through my customer journey, I can keep coming back to the website, as the destination, for how do I engage, like in, deeper content that I need to get for other stakeholders in a decision, or once I'm ready to make a sale, whether I'm doing that like transaction either entirely digitally through your website or using some sort of like digital assistance to get to the right, sales rep. But then after the sale, like, where am I going for, support? Where am I going for like, education, the sort of customer success support side of things. If I need to make, changes to the relationship I have with the company, very often like there's components of that are being delivered through the website. Maybe even depending on the nature of my service itself, has components of it that are, like embedded in the web experience. And so from a customer's perspective, right, you keep coming back to it, as that center of gravity. But then if you like look inside the organization supporting that, right, you've now got all these different teams and departments, that are stakeholders in those different components. I mean, even within marketing, right? I mean, like, there's not unusual as a marketing organization, grows. You might have certain people who are, the guardians of the brand. You might have another set of folks who are like operating the end-to-end demand generation funnel. You might have a specialist group here on, search engine optimization, and so even within marketing, you tend to have a very large variety of folks who are responsible for different facets, of how that web experience is delivered. And then when you get beyond marketing, right, sales, support, aspects of the product and the operations itself. So again, this is part of like the challenge with just given the scope of the website, is making sure that you're able to connect and serve the needs of both the customer along that journey, but the internal stakeholders that match with it. But one of the things that makes it particularly interesting is it's not only I feel like I'm going to make some sort of big data. Remember they used to say in big data, it's like the volume, velocity, variety. In some ways, it's like that same dynamic that happens around the website is the volume of things we're doing through the website continues to grow. The variety of different teams and different stakeholders who have a place in that. But we can't forget the velocity. The thing that makes websites so great is being these malleable digital properties. In theory, they have the ability to be updated and adapted very rapidly. But while that's a great capability, right, that's also something like if you don't have a good governance structure, if you don't have like good intelligence around the website, you got to make sure that you're not taking that velocity faster than the ability you have to make sure that the quality and the integrity of the experience is being maintained throughout it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Every time you're releasing new code, deploying a new page, you're introducing an element of risk, right? There's regression risk that you might break something that's already been done before. There's risk that the new page feature that you're releasing might slow something else down. And so each of those things definitely needs to be taken into consideration, and having a good governance process matters a whole lot. Another use case, not a use case, but impact, I'll say, from the website that I heard recently from talking to a customer was, they were saying the importance of their site being responding well and being fast for talent attraction, i.e., it's really important for your business to hire top tier talent, great people. And if those people are coming to learn more about you and deciding, do I want to work for you or not? And they have a poor experience on that site as well, you might find it harder to attract and retain great talent as well. And so there are all these like ancillary reasons of why it becomes more and more important for you to make sure that the experience that you're providing in this like central figure of your universe to go well and to be right.
Yeah, oh, that's a great one too. Yeah, and again, it's a perfect example of the mechanisms where like, yeah, if the web experience is just bad for someone, you are sending them a signal of saying like, well, maybe our company actually isn't the state of the art place where you want to bet your career on. So that's a good one.
Exactly right. Good. Okay. So why don't we talk a little bit about the specific climate that we're in today? And it's, I hope it's not too hyperbolic to say it's a fairly tumultuous time. A lot of economic uncertainty happening right now. There's a bit of a decline in technology companies, in particular valuations, and throughout the broader market. There's budget cuts. We're seeing layoffs. You name it, right? And so everyone is really more cash conscious than they've been historically. And so how do you think sort of this theme, like how does this fit in with the broader sets of choices that, let's call them, digital leaders are making? Like what are some of the impacts that you're seeing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny, some of the research a year or so ago I was doing here of like starting even like the very first thing a business does. Like, if I'm starting a net new business, what is the very first piece of marketing technology I need? It is almost always the website. Like if I don't have a website, I don't even have a business, and then like everything else we layer around that as we start to grow and gain momentum has value to bring. But the web is our digital presence there. And I think as, folks are going through almost like an efficiency of review. I mean, like, boy, for anyone who's been on more of like, the tech side or the digital side, what a roller coaster it's been. Like first there was the initial thing with the pandemic and everyone's like, oh my goodness, the world's going to end, which then very quickly I was like, no, actually the world isn't going to end. The world's going to go digital in a really massive way, and so there was all this rapid investment, across all these different companies of expanding digital capabilities, buying new software, a lot of which, again, like, as a catalyst for moving collectively the world forward, yeah, probably more good than not, but happened very rapidly and not always in the most coordinated and orchestrated fashion. Now sort of coming out on the other side of that, things have settled back down, as you said, right, in an environment now where, okay, it's not entirely clear depending on what industry you are, what region you are, like, okay, where is the new normal, from an economic perspective? People are saying like, okay, let's step back. All this stuff we were doing under this incredible crunch of time pressure, let's step back and rationalize, what do we really need? What needs to work well? Let's get this well prioritized. Let's maybe some of the things that were done, quickly at the spur of the moment, if they don't hold up under the harsh light of, the sustainability of their value to us, let's take this opportunity to, offboard those things. And again, I think just as for, any company when they start out, their first thing is the website. I think pretty much for any company with any digital presence, and I'm not sure which ones don't have a digital presence at this point, it comes down to like, okay, still as we're going through this rationalization, how does this ultimately relate to the website? And I think, yeah, part of our discussion today of like thinking of the website, not just as a component in, the MarTech stack more broadly, but very much thinking of like how it's an ecosystem player across the other things that we're trying to do across our MarTech stack. Seems to be the view that I see a lot more companies taking.
Yeah, I think that's right. And one of the things that we've been really taking our time in market and making sure we help educate folks on is, as they're doing that rationalization, as they're looking at, how are we spending? Are we spending our budgets appropriately in a really intelligent and smart way? There had historically been a big over-reliance on paid ads to drive revenue in a lot of ways. And, for much of our discussion has really been about, the organic impact that having a good, solid, sound website can have on your business. And we are seeing that shift of, no one is turning off paid ads entirely, but they are taking a portion of the budget that they were using for that and then applying it into more organic channels because, we are living in a world where it's becoming ever important to think about how do we be, cost efficient, right? And so we're certainly seeing some of that.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to take a moment here. Maybe we'll take a quick, not necessarily a pause, but I want to make sure I remind the audience that the QA, the box is on the screen. It's in front of you. Please feel free to click, drop in, ask some questions. We have a couple more topics we want to discuss, and then we'll come back to those questions at the end. But I want to make sure to remind everyone that is there. All right. let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk a bit about the state of MarTech ecosystems, right? And get some of your perspectives there. Before we dive in, we'll do one more poll. If we could have that popped up, the question is, how many different platforms do you currently use to get insights into your website's health and performance? How much technology do you are you using? And again, I look at some of the extremes, 0 to 2. There may be a few of those. There's certainly been an abundance of technology usage, to your point about digital and the acceleration of it a little bit earlier, Scott.
There's a fun anecdote I'll share after we see the results on this. That
okay, you set an expectation now. It's hope it's fun. You've got the bar here now. So
all right, I'll do my best to live up to it.
Fair enough. All right, there's quite a few at 0 to 2. That's great. All right, so I'll let you chime in here, Scott.
Yeah, no, well, and again, this is good feedback, and I suspect the audience here is more savvy than most on like having their finger on the pulse of these technologies. But one of the things, we've consistently done when we've done MarTech stack analysis is we will survey people and ask them like, okay, how many tools are you using, this, and there's a certain number that tends to come back on average. And then we'll connect up some software to actually do a technical audit of all the different things that they're subscribed to or have integrated into systems. And it's not unusual for the number to be like 5x, what people thought was, because, again, part of it is as your organization gets larger, different folks who are different stakeholders tend to have their own tools that they're using for their purpose. And then also tools, not all of them are massive platforms. There's such a long tail of these specialized niche tools that people use for different things that sometimes we can lose track of them too. But all of that is to simply say generally speaking, for most companies, we're using a lot of software, and it's really important for us to increasingly get these pieces of software working together.
I like it. All right. Lives up to the bar. People have more than they think they do. We've done I won't share our too much about our detail, but we've done an internal audit of our technology recently, and I was blown away by the number of tech platforms that we have internally at this company. So yeah, your anecdote holds for sure. Okay, so let's move into it a little bit, right? And so you are, really well known for your annual yearly maps of the MarTech space. And I think I first started following this somewhere around the MarTech 1000 or so. And I think, you've in your recent presentation for the 2023 MarTech map, you touched on some trends, some predictions for this year. So which of the broader sort of MarTech trends do you see maybe affecting the subcategory of website intelligence in particular?
Yeah, I mean, while overall two forces keep happening in the MarTech landscape. One, there is, I assure you, consolidation that happens. We get companies that, for core capabilities, or sort of, firming up, being the leader in their space. But at the same time, right, the number of just new startups that keep entering the space continues to exceed the rate at which things are leaving the space. And I think that applies across the board. It certainly applies, to things, surrounding the website. Probably the most the latest news everyone is talking about, we'd be, it would be criminal not to bring it up in this conversation, is of course, what these generative AI, APIs have now enabled. And we're even just at the very beginning of starting to see how these things are going to get adopted in practice. But I think one of the things almost everyone agrees is the amount of content that's going to exist in the world is going to grow at a significantly faster rate than it has been. Yes. Because even if we don't talk about AI just generating content entirely autonomously, which at this point in time, I would not advise people to, turn their marketing engine over to an AI. We're not there. But we are seeing that for the people who are the marketing leaders in the business, of creating content, this current generation of tools is accelerating the speed at which they can produce more stuff, more sophisticated things. It's not just text generation, it's also like how we do fun stuff now around, visualizations around this. It's getting easier to be able to take content, like something like this webinar and like feed it into an AI engine that like generates little snippets that can then be used in different places. And so you didn't need an editor necessarily to like, custom craft. I mean, just across the board, it's just this volume of content. And I think this is both right, the best of times, the worst of times for us in content marketing, because it is the best of times in like the ability to accelerate the capabilities we have. But the challenge is going to be both like, how do we manage this well? How do we make sure in our corner of the web, we have the stuff well organized, it's consistent, we're not creating a cacophony, again, going back to that media messages medium, like if there's a cacophony in our website, that is what people are going to interpret as our brand. But also like, the competition for things such as like, SEO, organic, traffic, competition is going to get a little tougher. So you're going to want to make sure that you're actually executing, at the highest possible level. So I don't know, those are the first two things that come to mind there.
I couldn't agree more. We have already begun to see this like sort of, the amount of content that exists on the web started just growing and growing and growing exponentially. And you're right, it's going to accelerate. And so having the systems in place becomes that much more important, right? To make sure that the experience you're creating is solid, is strong, and you can be found even, right? It's a lot of clutter. And our attention spans are shrinking, right? It's, we're darting our eyes everywhere these days. And so it just becomes more important to have authority in your message and to make sure that the systems that are delivering the mediums, to use your word, that are delivering those messages are solid and sound. So just broadly, if we sort of step out of web intelligence a little bit and say, you talk a lot about just ecosystems in general in MarTech. And, I think I've heard your words is like the idea that marketers are operating across this, interconnected platforms and channels, and they benefit from being, sort of connected and flexible. We've also in previous times that we've worked together, we've talked about sort of this idea of big operations and search ops and how those span sort of beyond just this purview of marketing departments and involved a bunch of different business departments around an organization, engineering, product, UX. So can we talk a little bit about those ecosystems and maybe the benefits of having solid, sound ecosystems within your organization?
Yeah, well, it's basically the other side of the, this current slide you've got here where, okay, there's been this explosion of all these different tools and technologies out there. A lot of innovation. That's the upside, a lot of innovation out there. But the downside is, for organizations, that are pulling from many of these different tools, as you said, like even doing an audit in your own company, you're like, wow, we have a lot of different software. Getting these things so that they're not operating off in their own independent silos, but they're able to start to be connected together, that particularly for you as a, as a marketer, or as a marketing operations leader, or even an operations leader in another related, department of the business, being able to see how these stuff get orchestrated together. So I framed this, a post a couple years ago about the shift in the industry overall, where the first stage of MarTech, when there was that explosion, from a few hundred tools to a few thousand, that was the age when everyone was like, oh, well, you're going to go suite, so it's all from one company and that's it, or best of breed, hey, you can get the best of everything, but good luck getting it to connect together. When you think about it, neither one of those options was like, you were like, well, I kind of want, the cohesion of this centerpiece, but I want the, best of the things I need from out here. and ultimately that's where we've converged, as an industry, of saying like, okay, you can have these platforms that are the, center of gravity for their particular capability, like Lumar here, like in the center of gravity, like around the website and the intelligence framework for it, but that it doesn't have to be uniquely just, oh, this is only what's in Lumar, that's how you can connect to other things that are related to that mission. And we're seeing this pattern now, across a variety of platforms in MarTech. And I think, not that we don't as an industry still have further we can go to make this better, but you're starting to see this become a more orchestrated view of the MarTech stack. And I won't go into too much of the other two lines here, but this pattern of saying, moving from these dichotomies of, oh, I have to do only this or only that, to, you kind of have a little bit of the best of both worlds. This is a pattern we're seeing across service providers that now do a little bit of services and their own software. It's the old build versus buy dichotomy. We're increasingly seeing people say like, well, let's get what we can commercially off the shelf, don't reinvent the wheel, and then like, let's tailor the layer we want on top of that. And so it's kind of fun to just see all of these things have this sort of meta theme of convergence.
Yeah. I think that's really, really well said. In our business, we've seen this play out, and call it the ecosystem, even within our own sort of software and the way that our customers engage with us, and the ways in which they use the technology of website intelligence. And, we've got a bunch of different players. We've got marketing teams, we've got SEO teams, we have product managers, we have web development teams, senior leadership, each with, call it slightly different but interconnected interests. And, we've done our best to create this ecosystem of software capabilities that caters to each of those specific audiences, but they all have to work together and come together really well. And so, there's things like partnership with web developers on the ability to integrate within a QA environment to prevent harmful code from disrupting the customer experience on their website. Then there's our SEOs who are leveraging the technology to audit the site and find problems and prioritize problems and communicate really easily with those web developers around the problems. There is monitoring of the site that's a separate sort of dynamic of this ecosystem to make sure that new issues as they arise get flagged and people get notified right away. And then all around, like, how do I communicate the impact of the work being done to senior leadership as I have to make sure that I can prove an ROI for the investment that we've made and why this is really important, why this is valuable, especially in this world, in this time of like having to rationalize all of the costs that you have in a business. And then, it's like, okay, we've got this thing, if I bring it specifically to Lumar, we got this Lumar thing, but then that's got to talk to all the other technologies that we have inside the business as well. Right. And so, making sure that there's, various API connections that can push data to marry, my web intelligence data with maybe content and keyword SEO data or whatever else it happens to be. It just can get really complex, and like being able to understand how those ecosystems come together and work just becomes more and more important.
Yeah. And that's certainly, I think, one of the great value for, companies like yours, where like, it's not just the technology to help connect that ecosystem, but being able to like help educate people and like help them understand, okay, and not only can you do this, but here's kind of how to do it and why to do it and what you can get value out of it. I mean, we're all learning this. The space just continues to, evolve at such a rapid rate that, yeah, I think anytime you find a vendor partner where you're able to like, absorb some of their expertise, arguably that's as valuable as, any of the technology itself.
Thanks. Okay, I'm looking at the clock here. I want to make sure that we get to a few questions. I've got a couple here. I'll start with one. What trends in MarTech space are you most excited about? What do you think will have the most impact for marketers?
Yeah, well, again, I think I have to say the generative AI stuff is on fire, and it's, I don't know how much hyperbole one could use at this point, but it's hard to not imagine that like there's going to be a lot of facets of marketing that are all going to evolve very rapidly with that. I'd say another trend that I think we hinted at earlier, I'm really excited about is increasingly the data layer across companies is getting more and more unified around these cloud data warehouses. And so you're seeing a lot of MarTech products now get much better at not only feeding data into that cloud data warehouse so they can be citizens contributing to it, but also getting easier and better at being able to pull data from that cloud data warehouse from other places and, leverage that too. And so, yeah, you kind of look at these two things, it's like with the generative AI, our ability to create content, but also our ability to have the AI help us find things in this massive data universe, and then a little bit more marketing moving beyond just the walls of marketing and getting more and more access to data across the organization. It's just going to be, I think a real gift, for marketers creating the next generation of, strategies and, operating capabilities.
Like it. Okay, this next question looks like it's for me. The question is, I'll paraphrase about innovations that are happening in the web intelligence space and Lumar specifically. We are working really eagerly towards, in the coming months, or less than a month actually, the ability to audit your site and get intelligence data out of the site about whether it is accessible for folks with disabilities. And so something that's really important, there are so many different types of disabilities, blindness, low vision, reading disabilities, cognitive, deaf, you name it. And there are website considerations that brands and marketing teams, web development teams, they need to consider. And so one, I get this little anecdote where when I get on my, my high horse, so to speak, and say, one, it's the right thing to do. Two, because folks with disabilities have money to spend and there's a market there for that. Or three, if you're a little bit more cynical, you don't want to get sued. One of the three reasons is enough to make the investment. And so whatever your motivation, accessible sites have a part to play here in terms of driving a really optimal customer experience. Today, that whole experience of figuring out how accessible your site is very manual and it's very time consuming. And so we're really excited about our innovative tech that's going to enable you to quickly look at your site at scale and be able to prioritize and fix the things that are not going well there. Okay. The next one is about your level of knowledge, Scott, around optimal usability testing for a website. What do you consider optimal usability testing for a website?
Yeah, usability is a pretty rich field here, so, like even some of the levels we were talking about, like, there's the actual performance level, right? Like if a site is slow, it is not usable. There's then the next level of like this usability, like, okay, well, how does this work on my particular device? Is it actually usable on the device I have? There's the level then above that of like, okay, what was the actual action I was trying to do? Like, what was the job to be done? The task that I, as the user, was trying to do, is the actual design of how that flow happening, is it meeting my expectations? This is super critical, by the way, on the relationship to SEO, because again, if you have an organic strategy and you pull someone in from a search result into a page, it's not just about delivering the answer that they wanted, from that first click, but it's also like, okay, someone who clicked to get that and gets on this page and reads this, what are the things they're going to want to do next, and is that a usable thing? And then what you were just talking about from an accessibility perspective too, is it not just usable, but is it usable by everyone?
Right.
And so, yeah, you've got this layer cake almost of things that, any one of them fails, you're failing down on usability.
There you go. All right. A question from someone here: which companies are managing their ecosystem in MarTech really well? Do you have any examples that you can state of companies doing this well?
It would be a setup if I felt, well, I think I'm doing an okay job here on the HubSpot side.
Exactly.
But, all right, that's not gracious. I think actually you'll see a lot of companies now. So one of the folks, there's a study, I'm trying to remember who did it. They actually did an analysis. They went across like the top 100 SaaS companies, and it was something like 96% of them now have an integration marketplace, as part of their site. That it's just become like one of these like, first class value propositions that, hey, I don't only want to know what your product does, I want to make sure that it's going to play nicely with the other products I have. And that same study, so it was like something like 90 some odd percent of, the top 100 SaaS companies in the world have that. But they also did a survey of like Series A and seed round startups, and found that 33% of those companies also now had like an integration marketplace like thing on their site too. Because again, now if you're starting up, it's not enough just about like, what do you do, but do you play nicely? Do you plug into the other capabilities, that your customers have? And so I don't know, I guess all that is, I take that as a very encouraging sign that maybe 5 years ago, the industry didn't think a lot about integrations and ecosystems. I think a lot of companies now today take that very seriously.
All right, so we'll do this one last one. I know we're over time, but we've been given permission to do the last couple of questions. So the question is, both you and I have mentioned doing MarTech analysis. Is there a template or an approach or tips that you could share that would serve as a good starting point? They'd like to do this for their agency.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely software you can get out there, like the SaaS management software that will, connect up to like things like your finance system and your single sign-on system, and just help you like do an audit of like, well, what are all the technologies we have? Be prepared to be surprised. But I think, when you're really looking at this, through the lens of, okay, how do I rationalize and I optimize? This isn't a thing of boiling the ocean. It's like prioritizing, like, what are the most important things for us to get right? And generally speaking, we're going to come back. It's the sun. It's the center of the universe. Making sure that, the capabilities you have for managing your website, your web experience, that's just a fundamental one. You've got to get that right. The customer data side is, obviously equally important. Like, we need to have the customer understand them, like make sure these things get connected. I would always tell people, like, prioritize those two pieces first, because if those solid foundations aren't right, it's almost like anything else you're trying to do around that is on quicksand.
All right, well, I appreciate that. And I think we can both shamelessly plug Scott's blog, Chief Martech, and also the Lumar.io blog. There's a ton of great content there that you can explore, you can read to learn more. And with that, we are past time. I thank you all for giving us a few extra moments. As we mentioned earlier, we'll have the recording available. Both Scott and myself are accessible as well. And so please feel free to come back with more questions if you have them. We thank you all for joining us today and look forward to hearing from you and seeing you on the next webinar that we have coming up in a couple weeks. Thank you all.
Thank you.